You've got no credible use for a flux capacitor when you can automatically go back to 1970 with a visit to Selhurst Park, complete with a post to block half your view of the pitch and third world toilets. I even saw someone with a mullet. In the news, Mother of God, this has been painful the last couple of weeks. The Red Swarm have just excelled themselves with the amount of useless fckwittery they have managed to roll out since there was last a meaningful game of football. Fat Sam wants to sue the FA because he says they didn't wait for enough evidence before forcing him to resign. There are no words for the front on this man. Oscar says he'd be open to a Premier League return. There's a surprise. Gareth Bale is apparently so obsessed with golf that he has paid for a replica of the iconic 17th at Sawgrass, whatever that means, to be built in his back garden. I would have thought he'd be keener to play football at the moment and channel his energies there. Latest from the Daily Fails Three Wis, Keown stated last week that he believes that Ozil has already mentally checked out of Arsenal. As far as stating the FC King obvious goes, that's a peach. Shame it's taken him 2 years to come up with that glaringly obvious gem. There was a story about how Ronaldo now owns £6 million worth of cars with pictures of them all. He has 2 Bugattis, boasted the headline. I can't tell you how enriched I feel for knowing that. The FIFA 2018 correspondent is still bleeding a living out of the media. This time he dedicated a whole article to who the diving little SHT bag would pick other than his teammate Harry FC King Kane. Jesus wept. Clippity Klopp is perfect for the Scouse, says one pundit, because he is under no pressure to win trophies. I'll pause here so you can have a good laugh. England were so boring that fans started throwing paper aeroplanes on the pitch. Wales have missed out on the World Cup on account of that little scab McLean, which means we will be spared Joe Ledley's beard and the hideous man bun. Although his hamstrings appear to be made of strawberry Lisa's Twizzlers, so he likely wouldn't have been there anyway. A former Middlesbrough player has been embroiled in a cock scandal fighting. Evra was pictured feeding his pet lion cub. I want to see the pictures after it gets bigger than him and isn't satisfied with milk anymore. Kaka tells the world that he doesn't feel any joy in playing football anymore. A world that has long forgotten that Kaka plays football. Speaking of people who you would think would be drawing a pension by now, Tim Cahill has ensured that Australia will be in the playoff for the World Cup versus Honduras, at the ripe old age of 84. Naturally, the Red Swarm have spent the last 2 weeks, as they spend all breaks in play, trying to convince the world that Antonio Conte doesn't want to be at Chelsea. And we've had Musendergate. He was talking about Belgium, not Chelsea, but the club have done right to sit him down and explain why emotional incontinence on social media platforms makes you look silly. Probably using Piers Morgan and Donald Trump as case studies. The others you'd have been forgiven for assuming that there was only one game on this weekend. And hilariously it turned out to be as dull as Michael Owen delivering a lecture on cheese labels. Checkbook Pulis lived up to his name by boring everybody to death and then complained he didn't have a bench, thus not so skillfully evading the fact that he had no intention of trying to win that match by, playing football, and trying to retain a level of dignity that in reality deserted him years ago. In that drunk now I don't really give a rat's ass about the rest. But as with every other weekend, we can go to bed safe in the knowledge that at least we are not Arsenal. Them no striker, Ruben couldn't play, blah blah. Set to be the first team ever to go 9 losses without a goal. Or something. What could possibly go wrong? Right, wrong. A game too soon for Morata, Kante yet to be fully assessed, but don't expect to see him in the next few weeks. Batshuayi up front with Willian and Hazard behind. Fabregas taking Kante's place alongside Bakayoko. Luiz was back and he lined up with Cahill and Azpilicueta on either side of him. Not our first choice lineup, but should have been enough to take care of a team rock bottom of the league and literally pointless. Glad all over, they sang. Probably a bit of a stretch, but they had mustered a lot of enthusiasm after an appalling start to the season, so more power to them. They could have had an early goal, but Zaha made the hash of getting a shot off. The crowd were so excited at even getting in the box that you almost wanted them to score. They never looked like a team on its ASE today. We came into it a bit, but we never really got a hold of the ball in the opening spell. In fact, most of the first 10 minutes we looked to be doing our best to help them score that elusive goal. Never let it be said that Chelsea are not benevolent. I did an interview with TalkSport this morning, in which I reassured the Palace fan on air with me that they would score today, whether it be a goal that bounced in off someone's ASE cheek or an own goal we scored for them. Just as predicted and joked about by myself and everyone with any lengthy experience of supporting Chelsea, along came Palace's first goal of the season, courtesy of us. Specifically Dave, who you just can't be angry at, even if he was pretty terrible, because HES Duracell Dave, and when does he usually let us down if anything that seemed to spark life into us, but for the cohesion on display it looked like some of our lot had never met until 5 minutes before kickoff. When I was 5, a coach taught me to point my standing foot towards the player I wanted to pass the ball to when I kicked it. At many times today it seemed that this basic principle was something that most of our team had been cruelly deprived of. If you're a Palace though, you wanted to score that in the 80th minute. Not the 11th. And happily we were only behind for a few minutes. We scored from a corner. A Fabregas corner. A FCKING long Fabregas corner. All I saw was a peroxide blob soar into air and make contact with the ball. Bakayoko, I forgive you for thus far giving the ball away every time you've had it. Suddenly, with Croydon being its usual bleak self, the floodlights burst into life and nearly blinded us. Presumably Croydon Council managed to reroute the juice back from whichever illegal caravan site was stealing it. Oh yay, said Father Ted sitcom alias, now I can really see how SHT this ground is. We were so missing Kante. It already lost count of how many times we had squandered possession in front of the defense, but at this point I wasn't that worried. It was pretty back and forth for a while, both teams coming close. Michy kept getting caught offside. He's not quite reached Loic Remy's appalling standard yet, but it's beginning to get on my nerves. He did, however, atone for these transgressions with a blinding-headed clearance from a Palace corner. Alonso could have put us ahead with a goal in the bottom corner on 33 minutes, but his shot was deflected. Again, we got a free header from a corner, but Michy was being pushed in the back. This was a theme and it went over. Local boy Moses limped off shortly afterwards to be replaced by Zappacosta. We could have been ahead again shortly afterwards thanks to a stunning free kick from Fabregas. The keeper was beaten, but it just rose too high. Palace bundled the ball off the line on 41, and you really felt like we had been on top. So what happens? We concede again. Sigh. Ref watch Mariner was one of my worst refs last season. Though he ignored a fair bit of meathead pushing and shoving in the first half, waited till the third consecutive foul to blow the whistle whenever it was hazard, ignored Michy being kicked in the face right at his feet or George Michael being dragged to the floor in a headlock. At the end of the first half I did not want to let Bertie the kitten PSS on him before I set to him on fire. Which on my Andre Mariner scale is actually a reasonable achievement on his part. But welcome back to him. That Palace goal changed the whole match, but not in any way that was remotely entertaining or good for my blood pressure. Decent watch for the first half. So what of the second? There was no second half. Thanks to us being very SHT. Mainly this one. Palace having absolutely no intention of playing football after the break and Mariner being a monumental bellend. As far as A is concerned, we did have chances, but life would have been infinitely easier for us had we managed to at least string two passes together, which for some reason today for certain players was just a level of mind-blowing intricacy that could not be approached. I can't put my finger on one of them that looked on point today apart from the two latter substitutes because they at least gave it some welly. In particular, nobody seemed to want to give Michy the ball in the box, with good reason I'm afraid, which doesn't help when HES supposed to be the one scoring the goals. At the risk of triggering a bout of nappy shing, it didn't look like he shook Conte's hand coming off when he was replaced by Pesto either fecking auto spell. As for Willian, he just needs a timeout. Badly. I've never seen him play with less conviction off the ball or less of a clue on it. As for B, I don't blame Palace. They would, sitting there on 0 points, have resorted to absolutely anything to claw their way out the other side of this game. With something to show for it. The time wasting and nonsense reached such epic levels that the game just descended into farce. Speroni was determined to spend nigh on a minute on every goal kick, tying his laces and picking his ass in the process, stopping to check his phone and even brewing a cup of tea at one point. Basically he did his usual trick of making Ben Foster, the arch time-waster, look like a FC King Whippet on speed. He was far from the only one. I could have literally left my seat and run a lap of the pitch in my high-heeled boots in the time it took Crystal Palace to take each and every throw-in. But then a team doesn't get away with this if there is a decent referee, do they? Which brings me to see if Mariner had a backbone, it wouldn't be an issue. You warn the player, maybe twice, then you book him. Mariner first pulled Speroni up on 60 minutes, and he was still at it on the final whistle with no sanction. We also had the most shockingly obvious interference in the game by a set of ball boys since Hazard decked the middle-aged one that was bigger than he was at Swansea. Any referee with a brain would just tell them to get on with it. I was begging for Musonda to come on. You could do far worse than bringing on a kid in form who's just desperate to shine in this instance. We got him on 64 minutes for Willian, and we actually looked like we had something about us at this point, after the changes, which is a credit to Pesto and Charlie. But ABXCA fundamental need to nail every slim, remote opportunity that you can muster. And we mostly balls them up, but they skimmed agonizingly higher wide. It all got too much for me when the ball boys got so obvious that instead of throwing the ball to George Michael, one of them ran to the Palace bench with it to ask them what they wanted him to do with it. And nobody said anything. Just the 6 warnings Speroni got for wasting about 20 minutes of the second half without sight of a yellow card. I lost the will to live and went in search of gin. So they were overdue, let's be honest. They were not as bad as the run of results implied. Yes, Mariner just destroys a game of football because HES limp, wet, flaccid and basically SHT. Usually we manage to surpass his incompetence, but that requires playing decent football, which completely eluded us completely today. Ultimately if you blow them off the park then it wouldn't matter, and we came nowhere near doing that. Even if the game had been allowed by our opposition to marginally flow after half-time, without a moron in charge of it, we were terrible. I was so angry about the overall shortness of today that I went the wrong way out of the ground. I've put about 2 miles on my Fitbit, stomping back on the right track to Selhurst Station. The only good thing about this is that I've walked far enough to mount enough calories to be able to drown my sorrows in half a bottle of gin guilt-free. Even funnier, not at the time. When I got to Selhurst I had 15 minutes to wait, so I went up the far end of the platform to walk up and down a bump. My Fitbit stats up further until the train came. The platform dude, Arsenal fan, also hates Mariner, says HES. Another strutting idiot like Clattenburg came up to make sure I wasn't a lunatic. The result, wasn't quite that bad. But I was still fuming enough to get on the wrong train, which meant that I had to get on the tram. Yes, the Croydon FC King tram link, which has always smelt like someone had pissed on the seats, to get over the right side of the ghetto. Then my actual train was cancelled. And I've left my charity pot on the original train, which is now going to Milton Keynes. The blame for all of which, in addition to today's result, will inevitably be blamed by a fair few people on Cahill. Sod it, it's done. I'm going to laugh at Arsenal, finish my gin, pretend match of the day doesn't exist and then move on. AC, please don't forget that you can donate towards Chelsea fans doing a walk from the Dead Sea to Petra in aid of wounded veterans at http://uk.virginmoneygiving.com. Alexandra Churchill.